Copyright University of Auckland, all rights reserved. The content and delivery of lectures in this course are protected by copyright. Material belonging to others may have been used in these lectures and copied by and solely for the educational purposes of the university under licence. You may record the lectures for the purposes of private study or research, but you may not sell, alter or further reproduce or distribute any part of these lectures to any other person. Failure to comply with the terms of this warning may expose you to legal action for copyright infringement by the copyright owner and/or disciplinary action by the university.
Course outlines, you didn't receive them last week. If you didn't get it before, you'll grab one, yeah. Here. Right, hello everyone. So we're going to be looking at rewriting today. Oh, can't see it. I better show it to you. Just before we get on to that though, I just want to double check with you guys. There was quite a number of students in tutorial 1 who were not there. So the tutorial 1 was last week, so quite a number of people were not there. I'm assuming that it's you guys who were there and it's the people who aren't there were also not there last week. But I'm a bit worried that if you were not there and you have enrolled into the course without looking carefully at your Delna result, you may, so this is another warning, the follow-up to what I've already told you guys about already via email announcements on Canvas and last week also in lectures, but I'm a bit worried that if you were not there last week in the tutorial and we didn't get a chance to check your writing and you have not looked at your Delna score carefully, and if you've got a low score in that, the combination of factors means that you may well fail the course. So therefore, it would be better in one of the academic English studies courses. So have a very good look at your Delna score. If you did not do the diagnosis, or if you did the diagnosis and you got a low grade on that, especially in your writing component, under 6, then you're probably going to fail, according to the statistics from the last 5 years of this course, okay? Therefore, you're wasting your money, and you would be better in an academic English studies course, which is designed for students with English as an additional language. Okay, so I'm not sure if that applies to anyone here at all. It might not apply to any of you guys, but if that is your situation, contact me as soon as possible. Maybe send me a little bit of sample of your writing. I can give you some advice. Come and see me sometime this week, and I can talk to you about it and give you some advice about which course to go into. The other issue is that those other courses are relatively full. You'll need to apply for a concession. You can't just automatically swap online. So you'll have to go through the concession process to do that properly. and I can advise you about that. All right, so good. Rewriting now, okay? This is where we, one of the important stages in the writing process where we take our work and we revisit it, and it's can be a reasonably complex process, so I'm going to divide this rewriting stage down into these 3 sub-steps of revise, edit, and proofread. Just thinking back to what we did last week, we looked at the features of a good paragraph on Thursday, didn't we? And that information is the basis of assignment 1. So really what I want you to do is to use those ideas from last week's Thursday lecture, and then write that assignment 1, and then use the ideas from today's class and rewrite it yourself, okay, using this revise, edit, proofread process, and then bring that revised version to class next week in tutorial, and then you're going to get a peer review done. Okay, so you can use the ideas today to work on your assignment 1, in other words. Do you remember the features of a good paragraph that I outlined last week? 3 of them. What were they? Yep. Yeah, that sort of relates to a broader feature, which is, that was a structural element. Topic sentence relates to the broader feature, which is a paragraph has one main point. Okay, and that one main point, yep, is well developed. So you're going to support it really fully, and in what format? In some organized format or organized structure. So one main point, well developed and well organized, and those features can be applied not only to paragraphs but also to essays as a whole. And also the rewriting techniques that I'm going to outline today, you can use them for your paragraph, assignment 1, but also you can use them for essays as well. If you rewrite, you're going to be on the way to writing good essays in this course and in other courses as well. So what do? How do you modify or change a first draft from that first attempt into a draft that you can submit, a final draft that you can submit with confidence? So it's useful to see the writing here as a process with several stages. So I'll outline the difference between these stages. The first, revising, is often the hardest, but it's also really the most important one. So what I'll do is I'll talk about some strategies that you can employ to make the most of that revising stage. Okay. And then I'll look at editing in a bit more detail. I'll include a focus on organization, sentence structure, and vocabulary. And then I'll talk about proofreading, where we tend to focus on the details of a text. All right, so let's go and look at that first stage of revising. Now, if you want to revise well, you need to develop a sense of objectivity about your writing. Okay? So it's a bit of a mistake to see the writing as something which kind of belongs to you, and that's a bit hard to do, but you need to try to sort of develop that sort of perspective, that distance between you and your writing. So, some way to develop a critical reader's viewpoint. Step out of your writer's shoes into this different person, different persona, and look at it freshly. Now, it's an important process, and you can see in this extract a little bit about the difficulty of it, but potentially the fun aspect. Have a look. Maybe the point here is, she's focusing on kids, and so she was writing for kids, and she was, explaining the difficulty of it, but the value of it as well. But good writers revise a lot. It's shown throughout the literature. Writers always talk about their revising processes. Here's Roald Dahl, for example. Right, so yeah, you can see this again and again. If you look online, if you look at what writers say about this process of drafting and revising, they spend a lot of time on it. And as they spend the more time they spend, the better their drafts get, usually. Research done in this course also shows that those who those who make extensive revisions tend to be the better writers. The weaker writers tend to sort of do last-minute fix-it jobs, where they're sort of going through and fixing the punctuation maybe, or finding spelling mistakes at the end of the process. But the better writers tend to make more extensive revisions on their drafts. So that we did this by checking, who did what kind of revisions they made, and then we looked at their final marks. Those who made the extensive revisions got the better marks in their courses, in their assignments, and also in the exam, where everybody had the same amount of time, which suggests that if you do revise, it tends to improve your writing overall. Because it's such an important stage, this revising part, here are some strategies. You may, if you look through those, you might think, well, they're bloody obvious, but I just want to explain a little bit about each of them, just because, and maybe you'll be able to find something that you don't already do. So using a computer, for example, does seem pretty obvious, but I've been surprised by the number of students who turn up to that tutorial 3, where you're required to bring in a draft of your assignment 1, and people have turned up to assignment 3 with a handwritten draft. And for me, that's really weird. Why would you try and get 5% of your final course grade from something you've scribbled down on a piece of paper, and you maybe chucked a couple of extra words in here or there, and that's it. So really, using a computer allows you to manipulate the draft, fix it, move it around, change it, rewrite it, and much, much more easily than you would with a piece of handwritten something, whatever it is that you're bringing in. So you can do the handwriting stuff. Do the handwriting stuff. Do that first if you want, or do it at some point. But I think it's still a good idea to incorporate the use of a computer at some point. Pausing implies that you leave some time, build in some time between when you first write your draft and when you come back and look at it again. So if you allow yourself that time for your own mind, your own subconscious, to work on it, work on your writing even when you're not consciously thinking of it, that tends to improve things. Have you noticed that yourself? Have you sort of noticed when you leave a draft or you leave a piece of writing and then you think, oh, I'm sick of it. When you go away and then you come back and then suddenly you realise, oh, okay, there's a big chunk of thing, a big idea that I haven't put in there that I need to put in. Or you suddenly see how you can rework that phrase into a more clear expression, or you realise you've got some repetition in there that you didn't notice before. That kind of stuff. So that's your subconscious working on it, right? Working on your writing when you're not doing it. So if you use this pause time, build in that pause time, that should allow you a better draft. You can also, employ things like reading your paper aloud, and that will, if you're doing that and you stumble at some point, that's probably indicating not your lack of reading ability, but some problem with the way that you've expressed your ideas. If you've expressed it really nicely, it should be easy to read. Okay, it should be a fluent read for you. So take notice of those times when you're stumbling, even if you're doing it through in your mind without reading out aloud. Writing a summary can be quite a useful idea. If you've got, for example, an essay, just give yourself 5 minutes to essentially summarize your ideas, and then look at that summary and compare it to your essay. What have you left out that you had in the original essay? What maybe have you included that you didn't have in the original essay? And that may be also a sign of your subconscious working at another level and helping you to sort of clarify your ideas. If you did leave something out in the summary, check to see if you really need it in the original essay, for example. It allows you to bring this fresh perspective to your writing. And similarly, rewrite your paper. Don't start right again from scratch, but just for a few minutes, 10 minutes or so, just try to, outline what it was about your paper that's essential, or the second idea, create an outline in a briefer, more brief format, not full sentences, but just maybe bullet points or something like that, and then compare it to the original draft, and that will allow you to see what's strong, what's weak, how you might improve your draft. So these are all kind of ways that allow you to become a critical reader. What you can do is copy it onto a new Word document and then just really be ruthless and cut out everything you think is not absolutely essential to the paper. Pare it back to the bare minimum of your draft, and then start and rebuild it up again if necessary, as you want to. And of course, you've always got the old draft there if you want to, save something from before. Reflections can help too. We don't have time to build them into this course, but I've used them in other courses, other writing courses that I've taught, and also writing courses that I've taken myself. And I found them to be pretty helpful. So when you reflect on a piece of writing, you think about the strengths and the weaknesses of that writing. What did they do well? What's good about this piece of writing? What could I work on? What do I feel not so good about? What might I want to focus on next? That allows you, again, to build that, develop that distant perspective, the objective perspective. Peer review, I'll be talking about that on Thursday, and you can also go through like a line-by-line view and look at your introduction, look at your topic sentences, look at the support, look at the order of that, go through in that way as well. Okay, so all of these strategies here will help you to revise, to review, to see again your essay. And because it's not that easy to do that, keep on experimenting with these approaches. Okay? When you do this, what you're aiming for, the focus of all that process is to improve the content of the text. When you revise, you're focusing on the content of the text. So you might be, changing the very basic concepts that you've been explaining. If you realize that, that's not really what I want to say, what I should be focusing on is this, you may have to make significant changes at this stage. And these changes can be broken down into these three kind of processes here. So you might be trying to add ideas, developing your ideas more fully. And I think this is one of the most challenging parts of this process as a whole. Not thinking, well, what have I got here that's good, but what don't I have that I need to add to fully answer the question? What else do you need to include? And there may be sentences, parts of sentences, but there also may be paragraphs. Sometimes there may be whole sections of essays that you need to include that you didn't do before. Do you want to go and get a drink of water? You all right? Oh, yeah. You want to have some of my water here? Okay. It's a bit harder this time of year, eh? Everyone's got coughs and stuff. Yeah. All right, so you also, as well as adding, you may be moving things around, transposing ideas. Again, sentences, maybe paragraph level. You're trying to make the ideas clearer and more connected. And within that paragraph structure that I outlined last week, remember you've got your main idea, you've got your supporting sentences, you'd have to think about the order of those. But that same process can happen at the essay level too. Have you got your overall main idea of the essay within your introduction somewhere? Have you built up to that beforehand? Have you previewed the body of the essay? Have you then used clear paragraphs with topic sentences at the beginning? I'll be talking about this later on in the course, so in more detail. Have you got the structure of those paragraphs in the right order? Are those paragraphs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is that the most logical order? Have you got your strongest paragraphs first? Have you got a cause and effect structure? Is it a problem solution kind of thing? Where's the evaluation coming in for the evaluation of those solutions? What are you trying to do? And have you got it in the right order? So thinking about moving chunks of your essay around. And deleting things. Delete unnecessary ideas. Off-topic sentences. Anything that's irrelevant. Anything which is repetitive. And again, computers can be really helpful for this process. You can delete as much as you want. So this first stage of the rewriting, the revision stage, it's a bit late already, but it's better late than never to go back to the assignment question and make sure that what you have got is really on topic. Okay? And sometimes I see, even in this course where assignment questions I think are relatively straightforward, I see assignments which have been written partly off topic or occasionally even completely off topic for some reason. So just a few examples from assignment 1 where it's just a paragraph. You guys have to just write a paragraph, right, for assignment 1. And one time I asked about this thing that I'm talking about now, about the rewriting process. And quite a lot of people talked about editing and proofreading and all the details of that, but they didn't talk about this thing that I'm talking about now, the actual revising stage, which is the most important part. So they only partly answer the question. Another time I asked about the benefits of the peer review process. And there's benefits of the peer review process not only for the reader, not only for the writer, but also for the reader, the person who does the peer review. But they only talked about one or the other, some people. Only answered half the question. One time we had an argument essay, assignment 3, it's an argument, and that I asked them to respond to the issue of the smacking bill, where kids were, not kids, parents have been banned from smacking their kids, right? Some students left out pretty major arguments on either side of the topic. So, for example, that the previous law was used as a kind of defence in fairly serious child abuse cases, and so some students ignored that aspect. They needed to include the counter-arguments. If they're arguing against that law, they should have included that as a counter-argument, but they kind of forgot about including it at all. Or turning it around, how some people see it as their religious duty to give their kids a bash, right? So, that's another, even though it's kind of like a moral-based argument or something kind of religious, emotion-based argument, they still sort of ignored that, but it's a significant part of the topic. So, those essays gave the impression that they hadn't fully considered the various arguments. Okay. So by the end of this process, once you've gone through this first revising stage, you should have content, at least, which is broadly complete and coherent. That's what you're aiming for. So it has all the parts, it's on topic, it's complete, and it's coherent, at least broadly, it's organised in some kind of logical fashion. Seems pretty obvious, right? But the only trouble with this is that it's actually quite difficult to do the revising first. It's a bit like, when I talked last week about paragraph structures, and I said, coming up with that topic sentence at the beginning of your paragraph is actually quite tricky, because you don't immediately think of the overall, essence of what you want to say when you're in a conversation, for example. You come up with that at the end. And it's a bit like that in the revising stage. You might not see, instead of looking at going, oh yeah, I'm partly off topic here, or I haven't fully developed that idea there, instead of doing that, what you might go is, I've left out a full stop here. Oh, no, that's 2 S's in that word, not 1 S in dissertation. So you might notice those kind of small details first, and you might start correcting that, and spend, like 2 hours going through fixing all those things, and then realising that whole page is off topic. Okay? So what you need to try and do is work on the kind of, fixing the off-topic stuff first. Fixing these kind of things first. It's hard, but you need to try and focus on that first. Okay, and to help you, go back and use those revising strategies that I outlined before. Okay, let's move on to editing. Now, editing, remember, revision focuses on content, right? The essence of what you're going to say. The editing the focus is on the expression, the way that you say those ideas, the way that you communicate those ideas to the reader. So you're trying, at this stage in the rewriting process, you're trying to make sure that your writing is clearly written and expressed in the best way possible. So I will explain these 3 areas here, 1, 2, and 3. But just notice that similarly with the revising stage, some of the processes you go through are quite similar to what you did before. So, you might be moving things around again. But at this stage, instead of moving around big chunks of essay, probably what you're doing is moving around bits of sentences, a few words here or there, because you're trying to improve the sound, the flow of the language. Working on that expression. You might be deleting not big paragraphs or off-topic information. At this stage, you're probably deleting repetition, repeated expressions. Maybe a few words where you've sort of been a bit verbose, and you're trying to be a bit more concise. Okay, you're saying the same thing, and instead of saying it in 20 words, you're saying that you want to say it in 17 words or something like that. So there's some research which points to the fact that good writers tend to delete at least 10% of their writing through their drafting process. Okay, so I find I do that too. When I write a draft, I'm probably deleting 15-20% of what I write, because I can write much more concisely if I read through it again. You guys probably should try and go through the same process too. we'll work on that a little bit in tutorials this week, working on editing ideas. And substitution. So instead of adding information at this stage, hopefully you're through that revising process, your text is already complete, but you may want to substitute some words. Maybe you're trying to increase the variety of the words that you're using. You're using some synonyms instead of repeating the same word again and again. But just as a note, this next slide shows you that you don't always want to vary vocabulary. Sometimes repetition is good. Do you see how the writer here has used the repetition of the word forget to emphasize this idea? And that seems to work pretty well in this text, doesn't it? So sometimes repetition can be pretty useful, but generally, and if it's a technical word or a technical expression that is important in our in that subject, and we can't, if we vary it, then it'll create confusion, and you want to keep that the same too. But generally, we do try to vary words. We try not to use the same word twice in the same sentence or within the same few sentences even. Okay. Try to look out for words. We tend to all have words that we like to use. So you might not be aware of which words you tend to use more than other people, but there usually are words that we seem to like and we seem drawn to for some reason. We stick them in our writing all the time. So you need to kind of try to develop that sense of your own writing. What words do you tend to use a lot? Okay. If I notice some in your writing, I'll point them out to you when I'm giving you feedback. Okay. If you do tend to repeat stuff in your writing, it gets annoying for the reader, i.e. your marker, right? Because we don't want our time to be wasted. And if we've read something and then we have to read it again and then we read it again, it's really annoying. Okay, so we want you to be concise, to the point. You do want to repeat your main idea in the introduction and conclusion of an essay. We want you to do that. But at other times, repetition comes across as kind of wasting our time. So if you're from a culture which has a very strong oral tradition, so a lot of speeches, a lot of public communicative acts, then you have to be careful when you're writing, because it doesn't work like that in academic writing, in English academic writing at least. We want you to be concise, to the point, clear, direct, fully explained, but not repeated, not repetitive. I'm doing a lot of repetition here, you may have noticed, right? But this is a public communicative, oral performance, right? So I have to repeat stuff because I want the message to get through clearly. Right. So we'll go back to those three areas from editing, about editing: organisation, sentence structure, and vocab. The one main idea, I kind of talked about quite a lot last week, relating to the topic sentence, for example, within paragraphs. At this stage, in the editing stage, there should only be minor changes because you probably would have looked at this already in the revising stage. But remember that it's still counterintuitive, to come up with this topic sentence straight off. So if you haven't fully checked that, do it again at the editing stage. Order of ideas. Does your topic sentence logically lead into the supporting sentences? Is there a bit of a jump there from the topic to the support? Do you need some kind of signal to smooth that transition? Are those supporting sentences organised in the most logical way possible? Think about this especially for assignment 1, because we'll be looking at this. How have you organised your ideas? Have you gone to one idea and start off another idea and then come back to that first idea again? That's not very logical. You'll need to reorganise your ideas to make sure it's logical. The order will depend generally, on the kind of writing. Argument, narrative, description. What kind of writing is it? Problem solution. There'll be a range of orders possible. And remember about the purpose. I briefly mentioned this last week too. The purpose is to, of course, ensure that you can show you that you've got the information required to pass that particular assignment in the course. But it will remind you a little bit of your audience. That will sort of hopefully remind you of the style in which you need to write. Sometimes, there's different things that you need to consider. Order of the arguments in which you present arguments. If you're taking a position where you think maybe you're going to be arguing against what your tutor or your reader thinks, if you're taking quite a controversial position, for example, sometimes it's a better idea to look at the counter-arguments first. Those will be the arguments which the marker, the reader, thinks are right. So look at those and then find some way to undermine those, discredit them, refute them, and then bring in your own arguments. That's one possibility. Another thing about is how do you start an essay? Do you just put your main idea first in the very first sentence, or do you provide some kind of background or some kind of context or some kind of rationale for the essay first? Build up, lead towards your main idea. That's what I'm going to suggest you do later on when we look at essay structures. Think about what's normal, though, in your subject that you're writing in. There is some variation across subjects. In sociology, the lecturers that I've interviewed as part of my research have suggested that potentially any position is going to be okay in sociology, as long as you can back it up with relevant theories, relevant ideas, relevant examples. Then that position can potentially get you an A mark in that paper. But because of that possible variation in the way that different students approach a subject, sociology lecturers like to see a nice, clear sense of direction. What are they going to be reading about from the introduction of the essay? Because it could go any potential direction. So they want to see your position coming across really clearly in the beginning of that essay. In history, because you're referring to some historical context nearly always, dates are really useful according to history lecturers. Okay, they want to see that historical context and clearly established. What age are you talking about? What particular year range are you going to be focusing on? Okay, so there are these varieties according to disciplines or special things that you need to consider based on different subjects that you're studying. The second area to consider in terms of editing is sentence structure. The most important thing I can say probably is to think critically about what you do wrong, what mistakes do you make. But of course you can't really do that straight away because if you knew, you wouldn't be making those mistakes, right? So, but gradually throughout the course, as we give you feedback on your writing, it's a good idea, I think, to build up some kind of checklist of the kind of errors that you do tend to make, and then look at those in subsequent essays and assignments and see if you can avoid them. Here are some common issues that sometimes cause problems. One thing to consider is the way that you're creating the verb, the doing word in the sentence, right? The verb. So, for example, are you using an active verb or are you using a passive verb? So here's a couple of examples of these. Here's a passive verb. The experiment was conducted by the researchers. So not the researchers conducted the experiment, but the experiment was conducted by, that's a passive verb form, right? We could also turn that around though and make it active. We conducted the experiment to investigate. Now traditionally, in academic writing, which one did we prefer? Which one is preferred, do you think, traditionally? First one, yeah? Passive verb form. And this is because we see the passive as sort of making our role less significant, so it sounds a little bit more objective sounding. Okay, not I conducted it, not I did it, which sort of implies possible bias or subjectivity in the results. But the experiment was conducted in order to, sounds very kind of scientific sounding, doesn't it? These days, though, there's been a swing away from that kind of writing. There's a tendency to use more active verbs in academic writing because it's clearer, it's simpler, we know who's doing what, and so it's more honest, and yeah, it's just seen as being a better way to write these days. But that's not 100% true every single case. So sometimes we still use passives, and of course sometimes we need to use passives. Like in this sentence, right? If you want to emphasize the name of the books that Whitty wrote, you might write the sentence like that. Put the names of the books first, and then use a passive verb. Or you could change it around and put his name first and use an active verb. Depends on what you want to, but in other words, it depends what you want to emphasize at times. Parallel structure. I kind of really briefly mentioned this last week, but I was in a bit of a hurry. But remember, parallel structure is when you repeat a kind of grammatical structure or sometimes a word to emphasize an idea. So look at the sentence here. Good writing style is clear, concise, has accuracy, reads fluidly, and is adaptable. So we've got clear, that's an adjective, a describing word, right? Clear, concise is also a describing word, an adjective. And then we've got a noun for a verbal phrase that has accuracy. So it changes the grammatical structure here. And then it goes, reads fluidly, so it's a verb and an adverb. And then it's got an adjective, another adjective, and it's adaptable. So we've kind of got like 4 different grammatical structures here, 3 or 4 different grammatical structures here, which reduces the clarity of the writing. You could change this like this. Good writing style is clear, concise, accurate, fluent, and adaptable. Okay, now we've got 5 adjectives. So it's a repeated grammatical structure. It's simpler, it's clearer, the idea is going to come across much better for the reader. So that's an example of parallel structure. Tense use. What tense use do you think is used most commonly in academic writing? You think it'll be past tense? Present tense? Future tense? Are we going to put will in front of everything? Not will, eh? Not future. So it's either present or past. Well, which one do you think it's going to be? Interesting, yeah. According to the research, that's a good point. They must be talking about past tense in history, right? But according to the research, 3/4 of the verbs are in present tense. But I didn't check whether right in the history results, okay? So, but I think this is, when we're referring to other people's research about things, they might happen in history too. They'll be potentially using present tense. But yeah, if they're talking about specific past events like you'd have to do in history, that would naturally be past tense. But yeah, 75% of the time it's present tense is used. Reference. These are words such as it, or this, or that, or these. We call them reference because they're referring back to something else in our text beforehand. And it's actually really easy to get these wrong, get these a bit confused. Whenever I write, I always need to go back and check these things to make sure that that it is actually referring to, the reader will think it's referring to the thing that I think it's referring to. So it's a good idea to double check these because they can go wrong. The students stared at the text, trying desperately to work out a clue to its interpretation. That first it's is referring to what? Is it the text? Yeah, okay. But the more they tried, they must be the students, right? The more they tried, the more it, what's that it referring to? Is it the text? The interpretation? The clue? It could be all 3. So at this point, that last referent is unclear for me. And I would require someone to rewrite that a bit to make it a bit clearer. Okay? So those are examples of where, where it can be, that's an example of where those references can go wrong. Sentence, length and structure. This is another point that I kind of hurried over a little bit last week, but it's a good idea to vary it. A point that I wanted to make last week is that you use short sentences when you've got a big idea. If you've got an important idea, don't bury it in the middle of a big long sentence. Use a shorter sentence for it. Okay? So your key idea of the whole essay, don't make that too long, make it nice and punchy, concise, short sentence. Longer sentences can be used for detail, when you're explaining more and developing the idea, when it's a little bit less important. Think about how you begin your sentences. We had a look last week at some of those paragraphs and we saw different ways to vary the beginnings of sentences. That can be quite helpful. think about where you're putting important information in the sentence. In English, we have two sentences of emphasis in a sentence. One's at the beginning of the sentence, one's at the end of the sentence. So if you're putting the important information in the middle, there's more chance your readers might miss it. Fragments. These are ideas which are not complete in terms of sentence structure. In an English sentence, you need a subject, a thing that's, doing something. You need the verb, the thing that it's doing, and you need the thing that is doing it too, the object or the complement, the idea which completes the meaning of that sentence. She ate the apple. Okay, so usually you need all three of those bits. So here we don't have all of these ideas because we've got a word here which joins the idea to something else. We've still got it is not always the case, but we've got although it is not always the case. So what is although? Although it is not always the case, we still need the main part of the sentence, but it's not there. Or if you have a word with ing at the beginning of your sentence, sometimes that can create a sentence fragment. Leading your expression to flow and enhance your writing voice, thus helping the reader to understand. What's leading? We don't know. Or what's the result of that? You need something before or after that sentence to make a complete sentence. So you have to be careful with these, and I think I talked about this a little bit last week, but if you're not sure about what a fragment is, Google it. Have a look at some kind of language sites where they're going to explain about what a fragment is. Do some of those exercises which are there to help yourself understand that kind of structure. If you're chucking them in your sentences and your writing, it's going to make your writing less coherent. It won't flow as well, and it can be confusing for your reader. Last quick point about editing, about structure at least. You want to check your sources used at this point as well. So, how have you incorporated those quotations? How have you paraphrased that idea? Have you embedded it smoothly into your sentence? Does your sentence lead smoothly into the quotation and then back out again? Have you just chucked the quotation there as its own separate sentence? Is that the best way to do it? Is that word in that paraphrase, when you're paraphrasing the idea, is it done accurately enough? So you need to check that kind of thing at this stage too. Vocabulary. A few quick ideas, because I feel I'm sort of talking too much, but I just want to go through these ideas too. Try to avoid any kind of vagueness. Is it the word? Should it be many? Should it be the majority? Maybe you're going to use a percentage to make it more accurate, or if you've got an exact number, maybe that's the best way to do it. Use appropriate terms that are used inside your course or in your subject. If your lecturer has referred to these technical expressions, then try to use them in your writing. But at other times, try to keep your language simpler if you can. Try to be concise, as I mentioned before. Just about the appropriate technical terms. There's something in here about dictionary use. What kind of dictionary should you guys be using? What have you got online? Is it the Collins Oxford Dictionary or something like that? There's competing Webster's. Really, to be really accurate, you might need to use a specialised dictionary, one which is specialised for your subject. I'm not sure if you can access those online, whether you have to pay for them. You probably don't want to fork out money to pay for them. But if you are using a regular dictionary, you might need to go down and scroll through the various meanings of that word which are offered. Try to find the appropriate technical meaning, or the word the meaning which is specialised for your subject. Okay? Because there can be a range of different meanings, and a word such as language even can have different meanings depending on who's using it when. Something about avoiding unnecessary words. Probably just one of those words there would be sufficient, not all three of them. Synonyms, I've talked about that before. Avoid this kind of overused, tired language. What can we complete these expressions here? When all is said and done, think outside the square at the, what is John Key? At the day, at the end of the day, make it a, what's the word? Make it a number one priority. Every coin, sides, what is it? Has two sides. Exception to the, draw the at. Draw the, you guys don't know this. You guys need to do more reading. Okay, draw the line at, okay, 0 in on the board. When it's widespread, it's across the board. It's good to, like a coffee is good to go, a nutshell. So you guys, most of you guys, I'm sure you're familiar with these kind of expressions. Therefore, using them in your writing it sounds cliche. They sound cliched. They sound overused. Okay, they sound tired. Right? So you want to avoid these kind of slang or idiomatic, cliched expressions in your writing. It doesn't make your writing sound fresh. It doesn't make it sound original. Okay, it makes it sound like you're just trotting out stuff, and your reader doesn't want to read unoriginal stuff. Okay. Yeah. All right. So. Here's a suggestion. Oh, is there something at the bottom here? Oh, no, it's not. One suggestion is to use something, I think it's in your book somewhere, to use something called the waistline test. This is not a check of your health, recent eating habits. Instead, it's a check of how concise and clear your writing is. So you can pop your paragraph 1, assignment 1, into this waistline test. There's a link there somewhere, I think, in the books. And it'll show you how many words you could potentially cut out and make your writing trimmer, tauter, firmer, tighter. Okay? Collocation. We looked at this last week, didn't we? I think these expressions here, or at least one of them, and we found that the words didn't go together that well. Here's a couple more examples. I think, are these in your books as well? Yeah, okay, good. So what's the problem with each of these? Can you work it out? Have a look at those yourself for a minute, because I want to stop talking. Have a look at them yourself and be ready to explain to the class what's gone wrong there. Or turn to somebody else and do it together. Might be even better. Have a chance to talk about it with your neighbour. Just do that for a minute or so, and we'll check it together afterwards. Okay, so we'll look at it together, right? Just remember, I think did we cover these? Did we cover these two last week down on the slide there? I think we did the second one, writing style, affects expression given. We found a problem with given, didn't we? You can't give expression to someone. Yeah, do you remember that? And we said that maybe affects expression conveyed or communicated to the reader. That would collocate all right, but expression and give expression, those two words don't go together. They don't collocate. So here, did you find something similar? Or find some problem with the expression here? What's the problem in the first one?
The word you use, the word you use instead of like using.
This one here?
Yeah.
Who use...
No. Like changing it. I'm going to change it to using.
I'm changing... So get rid of who?
No, just get rid of who you use and just change it to
Yeah, you could do that. That would make it a bit simpler. But there's some other problem with it as well. So yeah, we could do that. Something else? Especially the second half. Look at the second half of the expression there. Yeah, oh, sorry.
We said that the comma's in the wrong place.
Commas in the wrong. This one here?
That's what we said instead of that.
No, I think that's okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there is a bit of it, maybe a bit long, but there's something else. Something else. Wording. Did someone say something? Something wrong with the wording.
You say, can you get rid of the word general?
Yeah, you could do. Okay, good. Something else. Oh, well, the expression is drowning the public's voice. Yeah, well, yeah, I think I would keep that word out in there, drowning out. So it has a slightly different meaning, eh? Sort of, it's like shouting over the top of someone, so you're drowning them out. But if you're drowning them, you're actually like, Jason Bourne all over again. Yep.
It's the wording of at the expense of drowning out.
It is.
It's at the expense of the general public's voice or drowning out the general public's voice.
Either or, not both. It's the weird way that they've chucked in at the expense of and drowning out in together. Those words, again, don't collocate together well. Okay? So, yeah, you'd probably say at the expense of the public's voice. That would work. Or influence policy decisions, drowning out. By drowning out the public. You could use by, or just drowning out the public's voice. Okay? But not at the expense of drowning out. So that doesn't work that well. And something similar here, I don't know, did you guys notice it in the second one? When that dress doesn't do you justice, or something, we can say something like that, but do we say doesn't do something just the same justice as clarity? We don't sort of combine those words in that way. So again, it's a kind of collocation problem here. We can say do something justice, or doesn't do something justice, but we don't say the same justice as something else. Yeah. A does not have the same effect as B, we could say that, but not this way. And there's something similar in this one. Okay, so it's a bit tricky to spot these, especially, I don't know if you guys, most of you guys have English as a first language background. If you have an English as a second language background, it's much more difficult to spot these things. But even sometimes for first language students, it's a bit tricky to spot them because you tend to write, right, seems okay. Then later on you might hopefully notice it in the editing process that something sounds a bit weird. Try to check it at least. There they are there. There's the waistline test thing that I was talking about before. Oops. Sorry. There. Writersdiet.com. Think of that in your books. Couple of minutes proofreading. With revising, the focus is on content. With editing, the focus is on expression. With proofreading, the focus is on the details. And you'll be checking for spelling errors. You'll be checking for punctuation. What's the difference between women, who are compulsive buyers, and women who are compulsive buyers? What's the difference between those two? Yeah, one implies all women are compulsive buyers, right? Are all women compulsive buyers? No. So we have to avoid the commas there. Okay. Which is correct. The quotation marks before or after the full stop? Depends if you're using US style or British style, actually. Okay, because we're, New Zealand, we tend to use the quotation marks and then the full stop. But, it doesn't really matter which style you use as long as you're consistent. Grammar. Oh, another one which has two possible answers there. You have to check for grammar at this stage. Is the grammatical, structures okay? Oops, do a final check of your sentence structures. Look for formatting issues such as these ones here. I've given you some suggestions on page 5 and also page 7, 8, 9, 10 of your course outline which is there if you haven't picked it up, for formatting for this course. So we submit online in this course, so you might think, oh, I can just chuck it all into a really, really small font and you can just enlarge it. But it doesn't work like that because we're going to be giving you feedback on your online draft, and so we want to still have nice, clear draft font. 12 point is good. Reasonable size margin for feedback, and double spacer or 1.5 spacing. That allows us to slip in those comments easily and still read your drafts. Okay. If you need a title page, and make sure you've included that. If you need a title, some lecturers want you to use titles for your assignments, for your essays, then include that. Other lecturers don't. You might want to check each course to see if they want titles. I think just that is it. Yes, by the final, going through this whole process, finally you should end up with writing which is complete, coherent, clear, and correct. Okay? See you then.
Hi.
Hello.
I missed last week because I accidentally enrolled in the wrong paper and I only changed it on Friday.
Did you email me?
No, because
okay.
Canvas didn't update. I couldn't.
So you couldn't?
I couldn't. Yeah, Canvas didn't update, so there was nothing there.
Right.
I didn't know your email. I actually didn't
No,
know
of
who
course
you were.
not. Yeah. Okay, so you're in the course now.
Yeah, but what
You've
about?
got access to Canvas?
Yes, so I tried to listen to the recordings, but they weren't available. They weren't working, so I wanted to try to catch up. But do you have an office hour or something time I could talk to you about a few things?
Yes. I've checked those recordings. They are working for me. Maybe because it wasn't
Yeah.
fully sorted at that stage. When were you checking them?
Today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I tried again today.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you got access to Canvas now?
Yeah, so it's on there.
Okay. So yeah, in the announcement, I sent through the course tutor details, and I put in my office hours as part of that.
Okay.
So check that Thursday. No, yeah, Thursday in the mornings, 12 to 1, I think, for lecture. Also, I'm available Monday mornings and Tuesday mornings too. Oh, Tuesday mornings? No, that doesn't work. Monday mornings and Thursday mornings as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
As well as at 12 to 1 as well.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi. So you're only available on Mondays and Thursdays for talking? Tomorrow, Wednesday,
Tomorrow, yeah, I was teaching
Because
at
I'm
9 to 11, then
debating-
12 to 2.
I'm debating
So
whether this
2
is the
maybe?
class for me or not. And
Yeah.
I don't know whether to go to student services or just to come talk to you.
Right, okay. Yeah, maybe talk to me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be in my office between 11 and 12
Yeah.
tomorrow, or after 2 o'clock.
Or after you.
Yeah.
Okay. Could I come
Until,
at 2 o'clock? Well,
yeah,
after
but I have to be, so I have to leave at 2:30. But
Yeah.
if you come at 2,
Yeah.
I'll be
And
available.
your office is on the...
Yeah, it's in the course outline, yeah.